This place wants us dead.
What could have done that?
There must be a bear.
A bear did that.
I found only one set of prints. Large, 20 inches across.
I do not believe it is an animal we battle.
Not a man, not a bear. Then what?
It's the ice, Georgie. It's only the ice.
Welcome to
Ice Cold.
the Double P Podcast Network looks at AMC's The Terror. My name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM. At Fit and Trim on Twitter. And with me, as always, is someone who I like to call a lieutenant. Catfish. Catfish, how you doing?
Oh, I want you to know something. Stand over there. But Bubba, I'm delicious. You can hit me up at CJGman67 if you want to tweet at me how you would like me prepared.
I'm going to make this disclaimer right at the top.
Do it.
It's going to be for everybody. So sometimes, every podcast, we get new viewers who start listening through the show. So we may have some new viewers tonight.
Okay.
And to them, I want to say, we always try to keep this podcast light and fun and silly to keep the mood happy. And if you watch tonight's episode, we're going to be covering Season 1, Episode 9, The Sea, the Open Sea. And if you suddenly think to yourself, why are these bozos acting silly and cracking wise? Well, no, we're just trying to keep the podcast consistent.
We do, however, even though we like to make it a little bit light, we get into serious discussions. We had a serious discussion last week, very serious one, about the way the show handled something. And we're going to follow up on that tonight in our feedback.
Yes.
But yeah, we got to keep things light. 'Cause
Yes.
people are eating each other. It's brutal out there.
Let me say that I also want to apologize to any of our regular listeners and who are like, well, why isn't it as silly this week? Let's just get to it.
We'll try.
Season 1, Episode 9, The Sea, the Open Sea. Catfish, what is your ranking out of 10?
I'm going to give this 6, what
Whoa.
I like to call double T's.
Double T's.
Yeah, double T stands for, sometimes things are a little bit off. So this is a little bit off. Double T stands for interminable tales. Because that's what we had. It was story time tonight, the penultimate episode, and we decided to slow down for some real, after last week's fireworks excitement. We really slowed it down this week, and it wasn't that they were lacking for time. The episode with commercials ran for an hour and 20 minutes.
Wow, 6 out of 10. That seems to be your lowest ranking out of any of the episodes so far, Catfish. So this was your least
for sure
favorite.
Is. Absolutely, is my least favorite, and it's mostly for the interminable tales. It's also for there's not a lot of action unless you call eating your friends action, and the little bit that happens at the end, that action was just mystifying. The decisions crocheters make. Come on, you were in the same boat. We were like, what do you mean we're put down the
gun.
Put down the guns. They already shot somebody just willy-nilly. So anyway, I mean, it wasn't about my frustration with that. It was just my frustration. We're at the next to last episode. Last episode, the conversation that we had a big conflict about was, did Tuunbaq come in too soon? Because I wanted to see the crew choose sides between Crozier and Mr. Hoaxy, who we call Mr. Hickey because it turns out he's not really Mr. Hickey. And that was my issue, was I would like to have seen that build and then Tuunbaq come in. This week, I was begging Tuunbaq to show up at about minute 33. Please, come in and stir things up a little bit. So, you know what? I blathered on enough. Bubba, you have been feeling the heartbeat, the pulse. You have been right there flowing along with our readers all season. Our listeners. Some people may have this episode transcribed and read it. So what is your rating for tonight's episode? The Sea, the Open Sea. Bubba, go.
Catfish, you and I are going to have a big debate tonight. I am going 8 double D's out of 10.
Double D's?
Donner depressing. Because this is like the Donner Party. It's getting pretty depressing. But you're mentioning that end moment where, yes, I didn't understand Captain Crozier telling his guys to put down the guns. I didn't agree with that decision. But this episode, as depressing as it was, as Donner Party disgusting as it was, many of these deaths I've felt. We've been following these good guys. I've been putting them on the Double B Bubba boat all season long. And call me crazy. Hartnell. the one who got shot at the end, who we've been following. We probably have never mentioned his name on the show. His name doesn't come up too much, but Hartnell was one of the guys who went with Hickey to go get Lady Silence. He got whipped. Then seemingly after the whipping, he switched sides. He was like, Hickey, screw you. This is
No pun intended.
This is my chance to redeem myself, get good in the captain's eyes. I didn't mention it last week, but when Tuunbaq attacked Terror Camp Clear, Hartnell was one of the guys, like everybody jumped in one of the rafts, and Hartnell was one of the guys at the front of the raft holding a gun who was going to defend the raft and all the men in the raft from Tuunbaq. So seeing him get shot, oh my God, it was shocking. It was thrilling. This was a very slow episode.
Well, that's the thing.
Which knocked me down from 9 last week to 8 this week. But despite the slowness...
we pretty much agree, because I was affected by all their deaths too. But you can't put 2 8-minute monologues back to back in the next to last episode. It's got to come earlier. I'm still affected by those people. I would have been affected even less if I was sad to see them go, rather than like, oh my God, they'll never monologue again. Thank God. I mean, I think we're pretty close.
We're pretty close. We'll debate it throughout the episode. We'll also get to our Double L, loyal listener feedback.
Oh, yeah, we got a lot of that.
And we got some. We're going to get to it at the end of today's podcast, including from Peter,
the end. Okay.
Morgan, Nathan, first name, last name, Shakespeare of Thrones, Laura Feldman, Linda Tarver,
wow,
Billy Alcombe, Lariat 1980, Andrew Murphy, Mike R., Dawn Ivy Hare, Frank Dodd, Carson Young, and Vernon R. Wright in Constitutional Care. We'll get to
we got a lot of great feedback about last week's episode.
Plus, we'll also, at the end of today's podcast, if you sit through us long enough, we're going to talk about other things here on the Double P Podcast Network and possible things we might do going forward. Know that the best place to find out all that we do is on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Double P Podcast. That's the word double, the single letter
P,
the word
podcast, plural.
Facebook.com/Double P Podcast. You can always follow the page, like the page, and that'll keep you up to date on everything we do. And we'll also have to resolve last week's debate about, was the Tuunbaq showing up when it did? Did you enjoy that, or did you need, as Catfish has already mentioned on tonight's podcast, did you need that infamous crew to say, I'm going with Hickey. Unnoose Hickey. I'm staying with you, Captain.
Yeah, we did one of those awesome Twitter polls, so we'll go into that. That'll be at the end. So if you just want to know about last week's episode and chatter from that, you can skip the next part. But for now, we're going to talk about this week's episode. Now, Bubba, I had a question coming in.
Let's hear it.
The title of this episode was The Sea, the Open Sea. But it wasn't S-E-A. It was the letter C. The letter C, the letter C, the open letter C. So as we were going through things, I was trying to figure out what the C was.
Oh, well, I know. So you mean the letter C. What the
letter C stood for.
The C, the open C.
What's it stand for? Because I thought it was going to be very clever, because...
Clever begins with C. That's a good point.
Right.
The clever, the open clever.
So as we go through, I'm also going to note when I thought to myself, aha, that's what the C stands for.
Well, maybe it stands for... the very first scene, Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Charles Dickens is there. He's introducing everybody at the London Cultural Society. He's trying to raise awareness, and Sir John Franklin's wife is there, as we saw her earlier. She's trying to raise funds to get a boat to go find her husband. Now, we know where her husband went, and they might need to raise money to get a submarine to find him.
Now... interesting side note, as an English major, the one thing I remember about Charles Dickens was he used to give public readings of his works before they got fully published. His books would be published serially.
Like a podcast.
Serially, like a podcast, right. And he would literally do hours-long readings. And he apparently really got into the characters. He'd do the voices and everything like that, and would read for hours. So today he decided, my throat's tired. Let's let someone who's probably married to a guy named John speak.
She can pull the heartstrings. Here we see the woman who rejected twice Captain Crozier's marriage proposal.
You know why she's sad?
Why?
Because, like Peter, she wanted to do it 3 times.
And wait for people to unsubscribe to the podcast. Wait for it. That was a good one there, Catfish.
Thank you.
One thing that I thought was we've kind of at times been tough on Sir John Franklin's wife, and yet here she's making this emotional plea. She's begging for people, come up with money, get your name in the program. But I did question this director's choice to just zoom in and zoom in and zoom in on her mouth. What was the artistic choice behind that, Catfish?
The only thing that I could think of, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I was going to bring it up, I thought the same thing because it's drawing attention to itself. The only thing I can think of is that the director thinks, well, it's not fascinating enough as it is. We have to do something, which is shocking because of the monologues in tonight's episode. This is the shortest.
Hey now. Perhaps he's zooming in on her mouth to provide a clean-cut transition to the guy who got a clean cut off the top from his haircut from Tuunbaq. We cut to a guy. This is disgusting. We saw those heads in the snow just a couple episodes ago. Now we see a guy who's missing the top of his head. Tuunbaq don't play.
Then when you say top, when people think top, they usually think like maybe fifth or a sixth. This is pretty much like 1/3, right? 1/2 to 1/3 of his head. He's missing half of his head, the top half.
Well, when you say a little off the top, Tuunbaq doesn't take requests.
He does, but it's like when I go to my barber and I'm like half an inch, and it's an inch.
Yeah, they don't listen.
They're not good. So this guy went to Supercuts and got his hair cut. Tuunbaq, Tuunbaq have cosmetology degree. Tuunbaq take care.
Oh, man. Before we leave the ladies of London, I do want to say that we see at the end of the episode, we see this woman who has rejected Francis Crozier twice. She's doing the thing that Sir John Franklin's wife had mentioned earlier about, I went out into the snow in my bare feet to see how long I could last. So they're trying to emotionally understand what their men are going through. And it's kind of nice to see that people cared back home, but this is just going to be a tragedy. This is a tragedy for everybody involved.
It is. It's a tragedy that she rejected a guy twice. And
No.
where are other suitors? Where are they? One thing that it's interesting here is that as they show top half head Harry,
Yeah.
which is my name for him, they say the next day. And here's another one of my issues with this episode.
Okay.
You told me apparently this episode happens over the course of a few months.
Of over 3 months is what I read online. I'm not sure if that was from the official Twitter account or not, but yeah, this episode you could not tell, but it's supposed to take place over 3 months.
It would be nice to get a stronger sense of the passing of time. The only thing that I noticed for the passing of time was when Mr. Goodsir's fancy mutton chops turned into full-on beard. That was the only way I could tell that any time had passed, and I couldn't tell that it seemed to me that the action throughout could have taken place in a week or 2 weeks. People are in bad shape, so they could disintegrate quickly.
Let me say one of the clues I think the episode is trying to get across to viewers is you see Royal Marine Tozer, who's with the mutineers who saw Colin's soul get sucked out. He pitches his new plan, and he says, hey, we could go back to the boats. And he says, we haven't even gone a quarter of the way yet. So a quarter of 800 miles would be 200 miles. So they've at least gone, if he's saying it like, well, we haven't even gone a quarter of the way, I think you could interpret that to say, well, maybe they've gone 160 miles, 170 miles, 180 miles.
Right, but that's one point. I mean, they give us a sense of like that there is
that would prove
throughout.
Right. Well, that would prove that you couldn't do this in just a week.
Right, but it's not until we get to that point that we have a sense of. In other words, you are saying that this episode occurs over a 3 month period.
That's what I read online.
Not that it picks back up 3 months after, and then we get like a week's worth
of course
of stuff.
That's not what
Okay, so it could be that because we get no clue of that. We do get a clue at a certain point. Man, it's been a while, but no sense of had it been a while before the episode started, and then the episode only takes a week, or do the things over the episode occur over a couple months? So,
well, this poor guy who lost the top of his head, Triple H.
Triple H.
Yeah, the half-headed Honey. His name's Mr. Honey. And Blanky's the one who recognizes him. He says,
it's always important to have distinctive clothing.
Yeah, your neckerchief. Your handkerchief around
his
your neck.
neckerchief.
Right. And so Blanky recognized him. Mr. Honey, he was a carpenter, but it's not like they're going to be building anything, so.
Well, hopefully there'll be no more mutiny because no more gallows can be put up.
And so this is just brutal. This is 32 dead as well as 23 unaccounted for. You would assume all 23 left with the mutineers, but that still means Tuunbaq went insane. 32 dead. Tuunbaq is a serial killer.
He's hungry for souls.
Maybe he really liked the taste of these because he went on a splurge. Now, one thing about him eating these souls, we join the only doctor left, and he's not a doctor. He's Mr. Bridgens, the only person who can handle any of this stuff with the good guys.
It's got to be bad. They started calling Mr. Goodsir Dr. Goodsir, even though he's not a doctor. So the fact that he got the raise there in the field, but Mr. Bridgens doesn't even get the doctor himself. That means he's real low.
Well, hold on. He was somebody's steward just at the most a month ago.
I'd be like, doctor, or don't talk to me. That's my new job. So this is where the first C came up.
But he comes up to this corpse that seemingly is not dead. He's like, it's missing its soul. It's like Tuunbaq got this thing's soul. That's how the guy with the missing cranium survived all that time.
Exactly, the guy who had the top of his head off. So that's what I thought. Since the soul was sucked out, I thought the open C, was the cranium. The open cranium.
We haven't seen that guy in a while. How's he doing? Oh, he got left with the ships to discover the Northwest Passage. But this is just the beginning of a brutal time. Mr. Bridgens is disturbed. JFJ, we lost him in this episode. He's been on the Bubba boat since early on.
Peace.
He's saying, listen, we can't bury all these men. It's pointless. What are we going to do? And Captain Crozier makes his first decision. Let's decide if this is the right decision or the wrong decision. He's like, well, the mutineers might come back. Let's leave them some stuff to show that, hey, it's okay. You can rejoin us. What? Leave food and supplies behind? Are you crazy?
Well, the first thing is that they decide we can't bury these people, so we're going to burn them. I don't know if Crozier's already worried about the other C, the open cannibalism.
Okay.
Because when you eat other people out in the open, that's open cannibalism. But he decides to burn them. I think, and this is what you were arguing last week, that the decision between the people can make between Crozier and Hickey can be made later on when each of these people see how the person they've chosen deals with them. So the people with Crozier, how does he deal with them, and how would that affect the way they feel about the choice they made? And the same with Hickey. How does the way he is now operating affect the way they think about the decision they made to go with him? So I thought this is a smart thing to do. Leave food out in the open. Let them know, hey, look, you may have abandoned us, but we still have decency and we would treat you with dignity.
I thought it was a terrible move. I think if you're not even assume that this quarter of the way there comes up a month or two into this expedition of pulling these damn boats. If I'm Crozier, I leave everything behind but the food. I think he has a great idea later. Hey, leave the tents behind. I know that I can't imagine these tents weigh much, but anything.
I'm sorry, I just find it funny because you were the one last week arguing that we want to see them.
Yes, and they do. And they do in this episode. They still debate if they're on the right side, right?
Right, and
Okay,
so the fact that he left the food is him showing that he still thinks that he can convince the other people by making this move. So he's got the long game.
See, I disagree with that call of why can't you just accept them in? Why leave this stuff behind? That is even assuming that they're going to come back to this camp.
Let's say there's two choices.
That's going to assume they're going to come back to this camp and find this pile of food he's leaving.
Well, I mean, at a certain point, it is suggested that they go back to the ship, and presumably they would come by this way if they were actually going to go back to the ship. So if there's two choices, either let's say they can't take all the food, that they have to take these other things. Okay, we can agree that they made some bad decisions, but on what to take. They should have at that point said as much food as we can handle and then 4 to a tent. Let's just, boom, no more fireworks. If their only choice was we leave this food's going to be left behind for them or we're going to burn it, you would still say burn it, screw the other people.
Ooh, no, I would say
they're saying we can't take all this food with us because we can't carry that much and we need to take these other things. Let's leave out the fact that maybe they should have thought better about what to take.
I'm saying if he's presented with, well, we can't leave this food for us, okay, sure, leave the cans out. How about this is terrible, but maybe you don't burn the bodies, so if Tuunbaq really does like eating people, he'll come eat these dead people.
Well, I mean, this is what Crozier, we have two very stark, different ideas about how to survive out at the edge of your humanity.
Correct.
So to speak. And for Crozier, the idea is either he's thinking, I don't want them to be, he doesn't want them to be eaten by anybody, by Tuunbaq, by
does
people.
Not, no.
So, and his decision is, he makes it clear later on, I'm not leaving anybody behind. I don't care what happens. Our humanity is what's important to us. And for Hoaxie, a.k.a. Hickey, the only thing that matters to him is Hickey's survival.
That's correct. That's all that matters. Mm-hmm. Now, back with Hickey's camp, the traitors, we see the quote-unquote leader, officer among the traitor camp, Hodgson's, who is he's having a double S.
Double S.
Shoe sandwich, out by himself.
He's out by himself, so it's clear that when he got separated from the rest of them in the craziness of Tuunbaq, the Tuunbaq attack.
Right.
And so when he sees them, he is pleased as punch. I believe he was smart enough to sort of keep his options open. I believe he could have joined either one of the parties had he come across them.
Well, he is just broken. The man is broken. In his monologue, which we're going to get to later, which I assume you really fell asleep for, he's trying to explain that, yes, he's broken, but even in his broken state, he knows that he should just kill Mr. Hickey because this has been a terrible plan. He's eating everybody. And then on the flip side, he's so broken, he knows he should do it, but he can't do it. Any sympathy for Hodgson here? Any sympathy for, if not a devil, then a broken man?
Yeah, I had sympathy for him until I wanted to punch him to get him to stop telling me that story about the papists.
Well, it'll get you never to go to church.
And Hickey's more excited to see him than anybody because he's like, delicious, more food.
Do you think Hickey, at this point, is already thinking about that? He's already thinking about this.
Yeah, I believe he is.
He's got to be planning for everything, right?
Yeah, I think he's already thinking when they ran across the Eskimo and he killed his compatriots, he should have had a little snack then.
Do you want to comment on how you felt seeing Mr. Goodsir with the mutineers? We know we heard them last week. Somebody yell, be sure to grab Mr. Goodsir. And they did, and now Goodsir has been dragged along with these a-holes.
Well, I was a little surprised in all the excitement of what was going on last week. Somehow I missed that they actually did get him.
I don't think they ever showed that. You heard them say it.
All right, so I mean...
And this week, spoiler alert, they got him.
He was hiding, and now it's sad. He's with them. He's one of the good guys. He is part of Catfish's crew. And now he's stuck with Hickey's hurlers.
Hickey's horrendous bastards. All right, we're going to be doing this all episode long. JFJ, the first one to really go. I mentioned it, what was it, a couple of weeks ago? It was his old bullet wounds reopening. He is so unhealthy, his shot from Birdshit Island. No, that was actually a different tale. His tale fighting in China is come back, and he's gone. This is it. We have to pour one out for JFJ and the wonderful actor Tobias Menzies.
So good. It was so sad when he went. Now, hold on, because I was going to... Oh, that is tonight's dinner bell, but I'm going to have to silence it because even though JFJ offers himself up, this is a nice contrast to what's going over in Hickey's camp. He offers himself up to the men. He's like, you know what? For some reason he says, I'm not Christ, but take of my body and eat it. That's what I thought. That's pretty much what he's saying.
Yeah, because he went to that papist sermon.
Yeah.
And he learned.
But Crozier says, no, we're not going to do that. That's the first indication that Crozier is going to live by a code, even if it kills him. So the interesting thing here is there a middle ground between Hickey's, oh, you don't look so well,
well, let's
stabbing sound.
Well, let's talk about this middle ground, and that is Lieutenant Little, who has really had some big screw-ups after I thought he was a good guy earlier on in the show. Maybe with all this lead poisoning, he's just going crazy. Lieutenant Little, on their journey, before actual JFJ has kicked the bucket, he's making this Hickey-like pitch, like, hey, Captain, why don't we leave the sick and injured people here, and then we'll go ahead, and then we'll come back and get them. Ugh, what do you think of Little's plan, and what did you think of Captain Crozier saying, no dice?
Well, on one hand, he's absolutely right. On the other hand,
Wait, sorry.
Couldn't
On one hand, Little's right.
On one hand, Crozier's right.
Okay.
But on the other hand, isn't Crozier the one that said to those guys back on the Terror, who knows? Maybe the ice will break up and you'll discover the Northwest Passage. We all know that I'm lying. Good luck, fellas. You're all going to be dead. So, I mean, he has made that kind of decision before. He left behind healthy people.
Yeah.
So I don't know what makes this different at this time.
Well, I think it is an important message. So in this case, I'm with Crozier. If you let anybody know, hey, if you're injured, we're leaving you by the side of the road, what is everybody else going to think? Everybody else is going to think, well, what if I get a cold? What if I just sneeze for a bit? Am I going to be left behind to die? So I think.
But wouldn't they have thought that already? Wouldn't they say, I'm so glad I'm not one of the 9 people who are stuck on the boat to discover the Northwest Passage as they freeze to death?
No, are you kidding? I bet everybody who's hauling this trek across King William Island, I bet everybody on this is like, God, I wish I'd stayed on the boat.
No way. They know that's a death sentence.
But
I believe those people
did.
did.
At this point,
I believe those people did volunteer, though, actually, to stay behind.
Yeah, English
But
goal,
no,
baby. English goal.
There's no way. You know that's a death sentence.
Oh.
They've been stuck on the ice for 3 years. 10 of them aren't going to break through.
No, they were stuck on the ice for 2 years.
2 years.
Expedition left 3 years ago, and they had enough provisions for 3 years. And if it melted, it's a flip of a coin. I think you are crazy. Listeners, Catfish and I are going to debate all episode long. We want you to go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Double P Podcast. Leave us some comments. Tell us what you think. So, all right, JFJ, RIP, great acting, great support. Captain Crozier is holding it together as best he can. Let's jump back to Trader Camp, and somebody who's supposed to be a leader and not holding it together is this Lieutenant Hodgson's. He's gone nuts. Hickey is already trying to talk Hodgson into the delicious cannibal craze.
So good.
He's like, well, what is in this veal cutlets and tomatoes? It could be anything. It could be horse, but we have to eat it to survive.
Right.
We have to do what we need to do. It serves
if there's food around and we're hungry, we should eat it.
In history, wasn't there the plane crash people in the Andes? I believe it was.
That soccer team.
Did they survive? The people who turned cannibal? Did they survive? Okay, so this is a terrible question that we all know the answer is no. But is Hickey right that we got to eat, dude?
Well,
serve up some good Gibson.
Right, and that's why I asked if there's a middle ground. Is there a middle ground behind saying, no, I'll never eat anybody, and between, you don't look so well, you're going to be dinner before you die? In other words, I'm going to kill you right now. I'm going to use my second sea, the open sea, cold steel, to shiv you in the stomach.
Oh, man. Gibson was obviously on his last leg. He was about to die. But the moment...
Goodsir, this is why Goodsir's not really a doctor. His bedside manner is, nope, what should you do? Be prepared to die.
Yeah, all your joints are going to start feeling like glass. Enjoy.
At a certain point, you won't even be able to sleep through the night. It's going to hurt so dang much.
Knowing that Gibson was a goner, when Hickey stabbed him, I was like, oh my God, what an a-hole. Why did I still rate it 8 out of 10? These visceral moments, it was incredible. Yes, this was a real slow episode, but when Hickey, who I've developed Double H Hickey hate, when he came in and stabbed Gibson, I wanted somebody to kill him. I wanted Mr. Goodsir to kill him. I wanted Mr. Goodsir when he sees the ring. What a great callback. So many callbacks in this episode. The ring that Young, the guy who died of consumption, who got buried way back when, Young told Mr. Goodsir, he's like, get this ring to my family. It may not be worth much, but it might be worth something. Goodsir forgot to get it. Hickey jumped into the grave, stole that ring, gave it to Gibson. Mr. Goodsir sees that. Man up, Goodsir. If we're going to have to eat people, Hickey first.
Yeah. I don't know. He's pretty stringy, Hickey. I mean, they're all stringy at this point.
How did you feel when Hickey decided it's supper time and stabbed Gibson? How did you feel? How did you feel Gibson should feel when he saw that ring?
Well, I mean, I think that when Goodsir saw that ring, then I think he's got to develop a plan. I don't know. He's been going along. He wants his own survival, of course. In this way, I don't blame him too much. He's a person we all want to survive. But it seemed like he was such a good individual that at a certain point, maybe he will. Now that Crozier is with them, maybe he'll be a key figure in getting them all back into the Crozier camp. But yeah, this was crazy. This is, like I said, there are two wildly different choices here. Stab somebody prematurely and then eat them, or never eat them at all.
Well, you asked the question, what middle ground could you pitch? And maybe our listeners need to pitch this. This is quite difficult.
I think the middle ground is what happened there in the Andes. At a certain point, you say to yourself, this is horrible, but it's the only way I'm going to survive. But you do not hasten anyone's death to survive. Mm-hmm. In other words, you survive as long as you can, and then if somebody does pass away, then
dinner time.
Dinner time.
Our boy Blanky is the next to make a decision for the captain. His wound here, where they sawed off his leg, it has become infected. It's over for Blanky. Blanky is going to go out like a hero. I'm going to draw that SOB Tuunbaq away from you guys. You guys run. I'll see what I can do.
I love it. He's got, hey, listen, he has got a dark sense of humor. He's morbid. He's like, all I need is 40 forks and some rope. And I interpret that as tie me up and dine away, boys.
Man, could you eat an infected wound?
Well, that's the problem. I definitely would cut that part off. I'm not like, who wants the leg? Nobody? Okay.
Oh, listeners, we apologize. This is just so brutal. But Blanky went out. I feel like he did go out like a hero. We succeed, you would imagine this isn't the last we've seen of Tuunbaq, not that we really ever saw him in this episode, but the fact that Blanky did keep him away from the crew long enough, a couple of days, whatever it is, Blanky went out like a hero. That's how I would hope that I would go out if I were in this situation. Taking one for the team.
I doubt that would be you. But
hey,
but let's not forget, the Northwest Passage to this day is called Blanky's Passage. He discovered it.
Aw. Yeah, let's just get to his farewell. He sees that frozen ice and he goes, boy, if this ice ever melted, that's the way we could sail the Northwest Passage.
Boom, he found it. It's Blanky's. And then there's the very end of the episode. Mm-hmm. He hears the roaring in the background and he's like, finally. And then, boom, cut. We don't see Tuunbaq at all in this episode.
Right, but Blanky had a knife. I was hoping Blanky was like, yeah, you're going to kill me, Tuunbaq, but I'm going to get in a couple licks on you, you SOB. I've gone from Team Tuunbaq to Team Kill Tuunbaq. This is terrible.
Well, if he had a sense, and there is a growing sense, that Tuunbaq takes your soul, I think the most important thing to do is, when you see Tuunbaq, you kill yourself real fast. So your soul can go over wherever it's supposed to go, instead of Tuunbaq's hungry soul maw.
Next one to go is Henry. Henry, Mr. Bridgens, soon to be promoted to Dr. Bridgens. His man, the guy he has affection for, his, I assume, lover. We haven't seen it, but he's the next to go. He gets put in the boat for a little bit, but it's pretty much, if you're put in the boat, that means you don't have long to live. And pour one out for Henry, and then Mr. Bridgens. Once Henry finally goes, and it's Henry's diary, The Sea, the Open Sea, that Bridgens is reading from, I assume.
Oh,
and so,
dang. I thought it was C for Catholic, the Papists,
oh,
the Open Catholic Mass.
Oh, so it was Henry's, and then Mr. Bridgens, he just goes off. He doesn't have the strength to live anymore. How do you feel about Bridgens? We're kind of jumping around the episode, Catfish. Do you want to say anything? The episode ended on a lovely shot of him lying down on the rocks there, and the camera right above him.
He just, I've watched, they have some of these reality shows where they put people through, like, SEAL training and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, people break at different points. Some people break at physical points. Some people go through all that kind of physical stuff, and then they break down at some point that you don't imagine they're going to break down. So I think every person has their breaking point. They have like what is worth living for, and I feel like Bridges is like, this is just a bridge too far. I can't go on. My humanity's been stripped. Peace out. He just wanders out into the field.
Even though, right when his man Henry got sick, a bird sighting. A bird wouldn't fly far away from food. Isn't that like the bird, the dove for Noah? Isn't this like a sign that, hey, there is going to be hope out there?
Yeah.
You would hope.
There is, but for him, this is a different time period. So I believe that men expressed affection in a different way than they do today. So I'm not sure whether they were actually lovers or not. But such close compatriots that the feeling was just as strong as that, even if there was no physical connection. So for him, he had nothing more to live for. And also, he thought, I'm never going to be a doctor.
Well, when you're a doctor and you've lost every patient, that's you really thought this will look terrible on my resume. Let's get back to the traitors for a bit. It seems Tozer has been out scouting the good guys. And he's like, they're 6 miles away. Hickey's like, let's go in the breast of this hill here.
And I don't know if he says it in, but at some point he says, my man. And I thought, my man, is there somebody from this crew that's staying somewhere else, or is it somebody from the other crew?
Right.
And I thought, that is diabolical long-range planning. Now, it makes a certain amount of sense. They're both going in the same direction.
Right.
They both have a plan of where they're going to go. But I would still be a little concerned if I was the guy left behind and they're like, you be the scout.
On Camp Crozier.
You be the scout on Camp Crozier, but we think we're going to make it and they're not. But you'll still be the scout.
Right. We'll come back and get you. Good job. Oh, God. That moment just drove me crazy. Everything Hickey does drives me crazy. And this moment in the episode I got a bit confused about. But when Hickey blackmails, threatens, what do you want to say he does to Mr. Goodsir to get Goodsir to cut up Mr. Gibson and serve him for supper?
Yeah, he realizes Mr. Goodsir says, no way, I'm a decent man. And so what Hickey smartly does is he puts the burden on Mr. Goodsir whether our other friend
Hodgson's
is going to live or die. He says to him, if you don't start cutting this meat up and preparing it, then I'm going to start cutting things off of Hodgson.
Oh.
So, check and mate.
Somebody's got to kill Hickey. Somebody has to kill Hickey. Why don't these guys see it? It's driving me crazy. I want it to be Mr. Goodsir just because he's so good, and I know killing somebody is evil, but I've passed the death sentence for Hickey in Bubba's courtroom.
Well, the interesting thing here is there is a certain point in the episode when Hickey is up doing the Sermon on the Mount to himself.
Yes, he is.
That there's a suggestion, maybe we can just go.
But they're even afraid to go. Tozer, who's pitching this plan, hey, let's go back to the ships. We haven't gone a quarter of the way. Let's go back to the ships. Tozer is talking to the other guys, and he's like, don't worry, Hickey will come around. He'll come see our way of doing things. Tozer fell way off the Bubba boat. He was never on the Bubba boat, but his constant
check the tape.
His constant stupidity. Screw him. What a buffoon.
Right, and he says at this point we need him to help pull, and the other guy's like, forget it. At this point, and he does make a certain case. At this point, by the time we get there, it's going to be winter again. So we'll walk across the ice.
There and back again, the story of the hobbits. And as these guys keep growing out their furs, it's like the hobbits. They're beginning to look like hobbits. I wanted to point out something that we kind of burned past it when we were talking about JFJ. JFJ was talking about, oh, it's so hot, it's so hot. And so this is one of the things, if you're that far north, that can kill you. You do a lot of strenuous exercise, you're sweating, you want to get out of these hot clothes, but getting out of these hot clothes and or your sweat itself is going to freeze.
Yeah.
You're doomed. And they'll give you these terrible sores that all these people have.
Now, important point, we're now at the episode where I can ring it.
At the supper table.
Soup is on. So these guys...
They're all tasting Gibson, and they're like, tastes like chicken.
The only one who tasted it before was Hickey. Wah, wah.
Okay, that is going to get everyone to unsubscribe. Listeners, we apologize. Go to Catfish's Twitter account.
CJGman67.
Tell him these terrible jokes are either not appreciated or you are also...
You're all in.
Well, to be honest, we're all going mad. The people the people here in the show are going mad. We're going mad. Everybody's being driven crazy.
Now, Mr. Goodsir won't come out. He's upset. And so
we're at this monologue that drove you nuts.
This is when Hodgson decides, you know what, I'm going to make Mr. Goodsir feel better by going in and telling him a long story. And so when I leave and I'm not talking anymore, he'll feel better.
Yeah, a long story about me giving up. You should do it too, Mr. Goodsir. Maybe this is Lieutenant Hodgson's Emmy submission episode, so he's like, I really need a big monologue.
Let me do this.
man. He's just admitting he's a weak man. And so he's making terrible decisions. So many of them are. But I do have a bit of sympathy for everybody but Hickey. Hickey, not on my boat. Hodgson's not on my boat. And Hickey holds Tozer's face like he held Gibson's face when Tozer was pitching this, hey, let's go back to the boats, let's go back to the boats. I was so afraid Hickey was thinking, well, for our next supper, it's Tozer. What did you think? Why doesn't Hickey just say no? Instead, he says, can you signal our friend? Meaning, I assume, this spy in the other camp who is really a SOB.
Right. And so there, let's just, this is very simple to sort of streamline this. Their original plan was, we're going to run. We're going to have less people, so we're going to be a lot faster than Crozier. That Hickey realizes they're not really outpacing them.
No.
They have problems.
Right.
And they can't eat any more people or they won't be able to pull the boat. So they need to find more people to eat. So, well, I don't know if that's his actual plan, but what he really says is, okay, now we got to change the plan, which means we got to signal our boy. Our plan is no longer just to simply run away from everybody. They've got a new plan. We don't know exactly what that is, but the first part of that new plan
is to get Captain Crozier. And this guy, we've never seen him before. He was on the Tuunbaq scouting patrol, and he comes back and he tells this lie that I have to be honest, I fell for. He's like, hey, it's melting. It's opening it up. I want this guy dead. I want his family dead. I want Hickey dead. I want Tuunbaq to eat him and then die. I'm sick of this.
Now, you want him dead, but how do you want him cooked?
Well, what's the most painful? Broiled, roasted, flame grilled, whatever it's going to take.
You know, somebody mentioned it earlier. I believe it was our boy who went crazy last week and got soul-sucked by Tuunbaq.
Mr. Collins. Oh,
Mr. Collins was talking about the fire, when there was the fire at the carnival, and the smell made his mouth water. It even made it even made the title of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Horrible from supper.
Yes. And reading accounts of this in my various readings, not that I have a specialty in cannibalism, but you hear this of people really hungry and the smell of, we're like animals. We're like every mammal. If you cook us, we will smell like a cookout. So that's bad news. It's bad news.
Somebody who is about to get a mini monologue himself is Jobson. Jobson is now starting to go. Captain Crozier tries to make him feel better, just like Jobson had the roles had been reversed when Crozier was going through detox. It was Jobson trying to cheer him up. Now we have Crozier trying to cheer up
Jobson's
Jobson.
Like, yes, please, mini monologue at me.
So I assume you dislike this monologue as well about the cow who they tried to ride. Got a kick out of the cow. Thoughts, Catfish?
You got a kick out of the cow?
No, somebody got a kick out. Somebody got kicked by the cow. Why don't you describe how you felt when this mini monologue popped up?
If I thought that, what was your? I didn't pay attention to it because I was so frustrated. What was your?
Yes.
When we've watched shows before, and we actually have gone to some panels for some people who create shows, and what they say is, we went to one on the show, the new HBO show Barry,
right?
And they say when they did a first cut of the first episode, it was like an hour long, and they cut it down to 30 minutes. And what they realized through the course of the show was, hey, if when you're describing the plot of the episode, if this scene isn't in it, then cut the scene. So you tell me, what is this story or this interaction telling us that we need to know?
I think it's telling us that these men are still the good guys. These guys haven't broken. Captain Crozier, who went through his weakest moment, is now in some ways having his strongest moment. The fact that he can find all his people, the people that are his buddies, forget the Bubba boat and the Catfish crew. The people who died in this episode are like his support group. Now, admittedly, Jobson lived in this episode, but his support group is JFJ.
Not for long.
Gone. Blanky, gone. And so, yes, it's not moving the plot forward, but it's an emotional beat to show us why we care, why these deaths affect us so much, is that these guys are good. And so I liked this one better. It was certainly shorter than the infamous Hodgson's, a papist walks into a bar and the bartender says.
It was. This one I think was better, but honestly I think if they did a cut without Hodgson telling his story to Mr. Goodsir, I don't think you wouldn't have missed it. You wouldn't have missed it for a second.
And maybe was that monologue though supposed to explain why Mr. Goodsir went ahead and chopped up the human being and why possibly he may still keep doing it. So maybe that's trying not so much about Hodgson,
but we already saw why Goodsir made that choice.
Okay.
And I don't think Hodgson's story is going to help him live with that choice any better.
No, of course not.
So I've said my piece about that monologue.
Multiple times you have.
Yeah, I do. You're right.
Why don't we drop in on Lady Silence, who is getting her own terrible news. Now, Lady Silence, she doesn't seem to be starving. They claim they can get food out of the ocean, but this is not cool what this guy is saying.
Well, the curious thing, though, is he claims there's no animals around because of all these dudes.
Well, the balance is not correct.
The balance
he
is not
calls all
correct.
these dudes like too much caribou and too much bear one year.
Right, but they have not. These guys have not. Maybe the caribou and the fish are down this year, but it's got nothing to do with these guys because they have the only fresh meat they've eaten is the meat they got off of the Eskimo that they killed. They have not caught any of their own game.
Yes, no, I am not sure. I'm not sure what this guy's trying to get across about these Englishmen, but perhaps it's just the fact that these Englishmen are here have put this island, our way of life, out of balance, and he's expecting, is it Tuunbaq who's supposed to bring balance back, and that's why Tuunbaq is killing them because there are too many of them here. We need balance.
Tuunbaq is the big balancer, but also.
Yeah.
It seems Tuunbaq needs a little bit of a firm hand. And Lady Silence has not been giving him that firm hand. So they're going to bring in...
Yeah, why does she have to do it?
Because her father did it, and then it's a family job.
I work for the family firm here.
Even though she wasn't ready for it yet, so she's not quite ready. He tells her, listen, this is your job. Don't worry. You're not getting fired.
Yeah,
You're just going to bring someone in to train you. You need some more training.
You know what?
Who
is this guy? Who is he to say? Leave Lady Silence alone, dude.
He's the head of the Shaman Guild.
Yeah, he's shaming. He's trying to shame Lady Silence, and I'm not cool with that.
And he does it appropriately, so he's like, listen,
he's like, the island only gives us wind now. Look, I'm looking at this island. It didn't give you a lot before. This is nothing but rocks.
Let's just put it this way. In this world, he is like, listen, we're going to drain the swamp. It's these people coming from foreign lands. They're the ones stealing our food. They're the ones. We got to get rid of them. We got to build that wall.
I was not down with this guy at all. He might be the tribal elder, or he's obviously in some position of authority.
He's the double S.
Double S.
Shaman supervisor.
I'm Team Lady Silence. I'm like, dude, you take care of him. Now, we end the episode with Lady Silence carving those little figures like we saw her father had sewn into his coat and jacket. Has Lady Silence got no choice in this? She cut out her tongue and I would assume gave that up to Tuunbaq before.
Well, it's funny, because she's so mysterious, maybe now would be an interesting time before we get to the last episode to try to figure out what has been the arc of Lady Silence's character. She's been with the guys, but when she's been able to get away, she's gotten away. Mm-hmm. She doesn't seem to be actively spurring Tuunbaq on to attack.
Even though these evil white men killed a bunch of her people.
Right, but she's also not like full. She hasn't gone non-native.
Okay.
They say people move somewhere and they go native.
Right.
But the people, if she went non-native, that means she'd be on the European side. See?
Well, I don't think she's on the European side either. No.
Right, but I'm trying to figure out what has she been trying to do? She doesn't seem like she's been actively trying to sort of connect with Tuunbaq, which is why I feel like she does need some guidance here.
Well, this mean tribal leader, he comes up and he's like, he's arrived. Is he saying the shaman has arrived?
Yeah, the shaman trainer. They're going to give her a name tag that says Lady Silence.
I'm like, dude.
Shaman in training.
I'm like, dude, why don't you do it? I'm not down with him. And then this death shocked me so much. This betrayal shocked me so much, where this evil, traitorous guy leads Crozier and Little and Hartnell and all the good guys to look for these leads in the ice that aren't there. The evil traitors get the drop on them. They shoot Hartnell, even though Crozier is totally bending to their will. This was so powerful. It frustrated me, but so good.
I'm surprised they didn't keep shooting. I think we have to think that
Kill these jerks, Crozier.
I think what we have to think at this point is Crozier's thought is, before, if someone disobeyed his orders, he would whip them as a boy, as a dog, as a worm. He'll whip them whatever way debases them the most. But now I think his calculations are different. He has changed. He's like, I want every single man who can survive to survive, even if they've mutinied against me. So even though he has strong morals in some way, I feel like he's bent them here because he feels like it's my job to get these people to survive, which seems a little off because it still feels like he's supposed to keep order, and so people who disobey and are mutineers should be shot. I feel like he should have been like, shoot him. So this doesn't quite make sense to me. Like I said, I can sell it as he's thinking every single man needs to be alive, but he has a rigid code, and this falls squarely outside that code.
Yeah, it frustrated me that he didn't hate these bastards as much as I hated them.
That's why it's a 6.
I think you're right. No, I think the fact that it got this emotion out of me, I think it's an 8. Listeners, what do you think? Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Double P Podcast. The word double, the single letter P, the word podcast, plural.
Now, for our faithful listeners, usually every week we have another recurring bit that we do where we have an ice cold line of the week where somebody really cuts somebody down. There's not a lot of clever lines of people getting each other these days, so there is no ice cold.
Well,
you did? I'm sorry.
I liked Mr. Goodsir when he's like, Hickey, I can tell from your accent, you're white trash. Ice cold. Ice cold. Your family, you had to eat every piece of the animal that your ma'am had. Ooh, ice cold.
All right, that's all right.
Goodsir.
Ice cold. Ice cold.
Hell yeah, give him hell. Is it time to get to feedback?
Let's get back to our feedback. Feedback. Over to Duba feedback. Give us some feedback.
Kill them, Crozier. What? I want them all dead. We've talked about it an awful lot at the beginning of this podcast. Catfish, you had that problem with last week, episode 8, where Tuunbaq cut short the trial of Hickey and the quote-unquote true moment when people had to choose. I didn't mind it. I actually thought it was fine. I love the craziness that it led to. And as I said last week on the podcast, I think people had already decided. So I thought people had already decided. And so the fact that those who went with the Hickey plan were going to be always on Team Hickey, and the people who stuck with Captain and who were willing to step forward and hang that evil Hickey, they were always on Team Crozier. So what do our listeners think? Who care what I say?
All right. Well, Peter Connolly says, I disagree with Catfish about the choice the men were going to make about whether to help Hickey. By not showing that scene just added to the general chaos that followed. I think some of the men who left might have only done it to escape, but they saw a certain death. I gave this episode a 9.5.
All right,
very
Peter.
well reasoned. I like that. That's a good reason.
Okay. How about Morgan? What did she say?
Morgan Sion said, I believe it's Catfish that I agree with. We actually needed more before Tuunbaq interrupted. All right, so that's perfect. It's
man.
even 50-50.
Let's go to the Twitter poll.
Oh, wait, there was a Twitter poll?
Yeah, Catfish from your Twitter account. What's that again?
No, I did do a Twitter poll. You saw it if you follow CJGman67. And so I asked, who was right? Was it me? Was it Mork and Bubba? And to skew these results, I put a third choice, which was, I said Tuunbaq, because Tuunbaq is always right. So I got 8% of the vote.
Ouch.
You and Mork got 33% of the vote.
A third of a three-way poll? That's not bad.
Tuunbaq got nearly 60% of the vote.
Oh, man.
Tuunbaq is a winner. Every Tuunbaq's a winner, baby. That's the fact.
Yeah. You know what? For Tuunbaq, it's always dinner time.
Yeah.
The dinner bell is always ringing.
I will suck your soul.
All right, let's get to our good buddy at Nathan Dockin on Twitter. He was saying the Double D.
Double D?
Dockin Dingy has run aground. He said everybody was too busy playing mini golf with Blanky's wooden leg, and no one was driving the boat.
But this doesn't sound like what I saw in the episode.
No, well, what happened was his DVR didn't record episode 8.
Okay.
So he's delayed, but he still wanted to get in on the fun. He said, missing an episode of The Terror is almost as bad as lead poisoning. Oh,
You know what? That's great feedback. Now, that's what you're going to do. If you're going to give us feedback and you haven't watched the episode, make it funny. It'll get on.
hey, we had more comments about our podcast, like this one from, I always say the best username, first name, last name.
He or she says,
Yep.
They say the chemistry between you guys is phenomenal and has led
Ouch.
to another great show. Yes. Personally, Mr. Collins' death is everything I love about the terror. The supernatural twist is icing on the cake.
Ice cold icing. We also got it from @Shakes of Throne, Shakespeare of Thrones on Twitter. They said last week was another amazing episode of The Terror. I honestly don't think I've ever hated a character as much as I hate Mr. Hickey. I'm with you @Shakes of Thrones. Or Mr. Hoaxy, according to Fit and Trim.
Actually, that was Mr. Hoaxy was a double C.
Double C.
Yeah, a catfish coining.
Oh, yeah,
Don't
that's
be taking
true.
credit for my coinings.
Oh, Shakespeare of Thrones still wants to give me credit. Good work, buddy.
Laura Feldman says, really enjoying the Double P podcast. You all are a hoot.
Thank you so
I
much.
like it.
Linda Tarver said, we like you guys on Double P. Be silly. My son caught me quietly singing along with the Tuunbaq.
Oh, Tuunbaq. You know, baby, Tuunbaq.
Keep singing, Linda.
All right.
She said, when Crozier asked for volunteers to pull the rope, I stood up from my love seat. I took a step forward and raised my hand.
Oh, yeah.
She goes, I'm on Mr. Collins' boat and would have married him if he had not died 170 years ago. All right. Heck yeah.
He had a good. Mr. Collins said a good cut of his jib was good.
Heck yeah.
Billy Eckholm says, how do you get AMC in the UK?
All right, so this is a great question. So we are in Los Angeles. We don't live in the United Kingdom. What I did some research, but apparently it's on something called BTV. And if you
Or
get
BTTV.
Sorry, BTTV. And if you get that, you can watch something called AMC TV on channel 332 and 831 HD.
No, sorry, 332 and 381.
Yeah, I think I've had lead poisoning today.
You have.
That's BTTV right there in the UK. Whatever that is, try it out.
Oh, and it also says here you found out they do on-demand content. So if you've missed it, maybe they do have it on demand. And then you'd have to figure out whatever the heck BTTV is.
We had a couple of comments about the extreme weather conditions, Kev.
All right. Larry at 1980 says, good point on how they must be emaciated at this point. How much adrenaline they have left to fight a ferocious monster, let alone hike across the Arctic.
Oh.
Whew.
Do you think the men in this episode really looked emaciated? Because Mr. Gibson, whoa.
Mr. Gibson looked great. They feel like,
You mean by great, he looked terrible.
I mean, yes, by great, I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I want to feel like they're skin and bones.
Okay, we're always having to go to WebMD for answers, and we got one from Andrew Murphy who said, the big dark bruises and bleeding gums are a symptom of scurvy. These guys have everything. Scurvy, lead poisoning, frostbite. They're just a walking case for Mr. Bridgens to solve. Oh, wait, no, he went out to his death. Mr. Goodsir to solve.
Now, since they have lead poisoning, if you eat them, are you just giving yourself more lead poisoning? I assume you can't cook the lead poisoning out.
No, I don't think you could either.
Mike R. says about the rockets, about JFJ's rockets that he fired at Tuunbaq.
Yeah, we have 3 great comments about JFJ for this, his final episode. Let's hear it.
He said those rockets were Congreve rockets, coveted for their incendiary properties toward other wooden ships. As referenced in the Star-Spangled Banner rockets' red glare. The bombs bursting in air, of which the Terror and Erebus participated.
Man.
Nicely done, Mike R.
Somehow the rockets didn't take down Tuunbaq, so we need more of those.
Yeah, but Mike R., that is content added.
Yeah.
Value added content.
Love it.
It's something better than what we knew about the rockets.
Another great double L who likes JFJ is Dawn Ivy Hare. She wrote, I felt so much during the first scene of last week's episode with Crozier and JFJ. I think these two realized no one can see the situation from their perspective, them being the 2 senior officers. That being said, JFJ knows there's not much hope, and he's using Crozier almost as a confessor by telling him about his past, his real reasons for going on the expedition, etc. That's exactly right. It was a great way to open last week's episode, Dawn.
And Frank Dodd puts JFJ in Dodd's dinghy. He says, I love the heartache hearing JFJ basically saying his great deeds were only done with those to witness them, to compensate for his own sense of inadequacy, hoping his low birth would be overlooked by acts of bravery. Yet, as Crozier remarked, they were acts of bravery regardless. And in the final moments, JFJ takes up a bunch of rockets, steals himself, and stands against the creature fearless and tries to blow it away on his own with no one watching. He is a man of courage, regardless who is watching.
Heck yeah, Frank. Well, having said that, Frank, I want you to know that all of my great deeds are only done on this podcast because I want people to witness them, and I'm trying to compensate for my own sense of inadequacy, my low birth, which I was hoping would be overlooked when you downloaded this from Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Yet, this act of bravery by admitting it right now, when no one is watching but everybody's listening, I'm a man of courage.
Hashtag hero.
Thank you so much, Frank. Carson Young wrote, how much did Crozier choke? Hickey is literally 10 feet from him, and he shoots the guns? What did he hit? What a moron. Ouch. That was when Hickey escaped the noose and grabbed all those guns. Crozier did shoot the guns, but if he had just blown away Hickey's brains, so much would be better.
All right, and so for Morgan Sion, we have some more. We have a theory and a question.
Ooh.
Morgan says, this is my theory. Tuunbaq showed up as soon as his shaman, Lady Silence's father, was shot.
Yep.
He continues to terrorize, pun not intended, the expedition.
It was intended.
Because they're landlocked in the ice and he is unbound from his shaman, which Lady Silence states before she offers her tongue. There's a steady fog with them until Lady Silence becomes a shaman. The fog does not return as well as Tuunbaq until the native family was murdered. Hoaxy Hickey found the beginnings of Crozier's letter to resign at the same time of the infamous bunk prank.
Bunk prank.
He held that info from the mutineers until he needed it, with, say, a noose around his neck. Crozier has always been on my Sion Clipper.
All right.
And I don't think he was on his ultimate A game on Hickey immediately on this episode 8.
Yeah, he should have been.
Also said, I really like the moment between Crozier and JFJ. I finished the book. I'm glad I have the book knowledge now to go along with the last 2 episodes. Though I've been thinking now with the book knowledge, I wish the episodes had been an hour and a half rather than just the hour. Like Terror Camp Claire Sian, I hope you like tonight's hour and 20-minute episode.
Yeah.
Also asked recommendations for the next Dan Simmons book. I think I'm hooked. You have come to the right guy.
Well, I've only read The Terror, Catfish. You've read other books by this great author.
I read all his books up until about 2012.
Okay.
So for kind of a straighter sci-fi, he's famous for 2 books, Hyperion and Demian.
Okay.
For a kind of a really, really cool science fiction that's mixed with this sort of science fiction with a Roman god tint to it. It's a mashup, but it may sound silly. It's not silly. It's really cool. It's Ilium and Olympos. Okay. So those two, I mean, if you don't like Ilium, then you don't have to read Olympos. But to get the full story, they're not really self-contained books.
Okay.
For horror, a long time ago, he wrote something called Song of Kali. And the reason why I stopped reading them is if you're someone who hates Barack Obama and believed that all of the things he did was going to lead to a complete dissolution of the United States, read the book Flashback, where all that stuff does happen, a complete dissolution of the United States because of the things that Obama put into place.
That's a book Dan Simmons wrote, huh?
That is a book that Dan Simmons wrote.
Ouch.
As I was reading the book, I thought, you know what, maybe this is coming from the point of view of the characters. You know, when you see sort of racism or hostility towards certain points of view. So as you go along, you know, there are flawed characters in books. There are even flawed narrators.
There's a flawed character in The Terror called Mr. Hickey.
Yes, exactly. And then as you start to read that book more and more, you realize, the person writing this book really believes that the policies of Barack Obama would lead to the breakdown of the United States as we know it. So that's when I stopped reading. And then I looked at Dan Simmons. He has a website and a blog, and I started reading his blog and all the comments people put on his blog, and I realized this was the first time I found all the people who would vote for Donald Trump. They're all there. So again, if you hate Barack Obama and love Donald Trump, you will love Flashback. I guarantee you will love Flashback.
Right, well, let's put that book to the side.
Okay.
Somewhere not on our shelf. Somewhere.
I left it on a plane. We were going on a foreign trip, and I got it the day before we left, and I was reading on the plane, and I just left it on a plane, unfinished.
Excellent. It's still better than those airport magazines. Kidding.
No.
All right, so ignoring all that, just guessing, somebody who's read The Terror, liked the show, which of these books would be the one you would say, read this Dan Simmons novel next? Which one?
Well, none of these are sort of historical fiction. One that I didn't mention that is sort of historical fiction with a twist to it that he wrote shortly after this, but is not as successful, is called Drood, and it's about Charles Dickens. So that's more of a historical thing with a spice on it, just not nearly as successful as The Terror.
Okay, well then ignore The Terror. Well, what's his best book?
Ilium is the book that I like the best is Ilium, because it's complex and it's just awesome. The mix between the Roman gods and science fiction, it's incredible.
All right, let's get to two final comments we got. They're both from people who are on Team Hickey. Vernon R. Wright, who's at Vernon_Wright80 on Twitter. He just said, impressive shanking by Mr. Hickey. You got to compliment everybody.
Shank it up.
Good work, Vernon. And our final one, it's from Constitutional Carrot. He wrote, I'm on Team Hickey, if for no other reason than the look he elicited on Crozier's face when he was doing his horrendous Irish accent. Oh, man.
Yeah, way to tell somebody, I don't care what you think about me anymore. I'm going to make fun of you. All right, so...
Well, that was your kind of favorite moment from last week's episode, was Hickey with the noose around his neck, talking trash, dropping ice cold on the Ice Cold podcast.
So brass, this dude. So... Listen, we have only one more episode of this left. Mm-hmm. So for people who are saying to themselves, my God, I don't know how I've lived without podcasts from the Double P Podcast Network. This show's almost over. What do you guys have coming down the pike?
Well, Catfish.
You like that segue?
I love it. I'm gonna record it and use it in every show. Catfish, we started this Double P Podcast Network for a couple of things. I was a guest on a Twin Peaks podcast. I was a guest on the great podcast Winterfell about Game of Thrones. And the only reason why I thought to kind of offer myself up as a guest is that in both cases I had something to offer. In Game of Thrones, I'd read the books based on your great suggestion. In Twin Peaks, I'd been a fan of the original back in the 90s, so I could offer kind of a new perspective. Then people said, oh, Bubba, why don't you start your own podcast? And so we started to do...
Right. Please, stop commenting. Stop being a part of our podcast.
Right.
Do your own.
And so I thought, well, we should do podcasts of things that kind of we have some knowledge about and love about that maybe other people aren't doing. We both read a book. We didn't actually both like the book, but we both read a book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. They were doing a BBC miniseries, so we thought, oh, let's do a podcast about that. And we did a really good job, I think. We've done podcasts about Ash versus Evil Dead based on your, love and history with Ash versus with the Evil Dead franchise. And so we did one about that. People have asked us to do podcasts about other things. I've even pitched, well, maybe we could do things like Westworld. But to be completely honest, number one, I'm not just hooked on Westworld. I kind of find it an interesting puzzle, but I don't love it like I love some shows. And also, I don't have a great inside knowledge of Westworld. I saw the original movie back when I was on cable when I was a kid, but there was nothing we could provide. So I decided to look out at some things that are coming down the pike based on books I've read. So coming out real soon, in fact, I think it actually launches this month on Cinemax, is J.K. Rowling, the author who wrote all the Harry Potter novels. She's got a detective series and Cinemax miniseries / I think it's already aired over in the UK about the first book, The Cuckoo's Calling, is about to air here. And I thought, well, we could do a podcast about that, but it's already aired in the UK. People can already go on Wikipedia and read everything that happens in it, so maybe that wouldn't be great. Also coming down the pike on HBO is a miniseries, Sharp Objects, based on a book written by Gillian Flynn. I read that book, but I didn't love it. So I thought, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I didn't love it either.
Another thing that is not coming down, it's coming down the pike, but we don't know how far out it is, and we may podcast about this.
Oh, I would love to do this one.
It's a book called...
Love it.
It's a book titled The Rook, and it was written by this guy, Daniel O'Malley.
Now, see, I love mashing up two genres and doing something interesting with it. Like here, we have a survival for terror. We have a survival drama along with a supernatural drama, and for The Rook, it's a combination of supernatural / spy thriller.
Yeah.
So that's cool to me, and both elements are important in the book, and so I imagine they'll both be important in the series.
Well, we don't know how far out that is. And one other thing that gives me some slight trepidation is that the woman behind the Twilight books is part of the woman who's behind the team to bring the Rook to TV. And nothing against Twilight, except everything against Twilight. It just wasn't for me. And so I hear that, and I'm like, oh, boy.
Well, not only that, I mean, the production values on those movies was... Ugh.
Okay, some crazy things that are coming down the pikes. We don't know when. The King Killer Chronicles, based on these books by Patrick Rothfuss. The first book, The Name of the Wind, you told me to read. It's one of the best books ever.
It's great.
Currently, they're actually trying to do two different things with it. Showtime is thinking about producing a prequel series to the books. So, like, based on material that's kind of not in the books, but a prequel to the books.
Well, it's interesting because the book, they could do something after the books. They could do anything, but when are the books going to finish?
Well, that's right. The books have not finished this ongoing saga, a bit like Game of Thrones. But then also, Sam Raimi, the director Sam Raimi, he's in talks to direct a film version of The Name of the Wind for Lionsgate. So there are two competing kind of tangent projects going out together.
How can that be? Only someone can own the rights to it.
Well, hold on. It would be
TV.
The film would have the rights to the novels, I believe, and then this prequel series would be, kind of based on something else. That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
That theoretically coming down the pike is something based on the fiction book The Hot Zone. I read that when I was a kid. I wasn't really in love with it, but it's an interesting premise, at least. There's also always talks about them making a Y the Last Man TV series.
When you say always talks, these talks have been going around for 6-7 years?
They've been going on, but it seems like it's warming up. If that came down the pike, we'd probably do it.
That's an interesting one. It's based on a comic book adaptation.
Yeah,
about this
series.
Is not really a spoiler alert. It's the setup for the whole thing, is that there's something that wipes out all the men in the world except for one dude and his male monkey.
Male animals were dying, too. That's an important point.
Yes.
All right. There's also a novel entitled The Nick, which they're talking about making. I thought The Nick was okay, but an actual much better book that's very similar to it is The Goldfinch. That's currently being made into a movie starring Ansel Elgort. I don't feel you can really do a long podcast series about movies, but The Goldfinch is a great book.
Ansel Elgort?
Yeah, and so we might do a one-off podcast on that. Other series that are coming up from books that I just happened to read, The Passage. Fox is about to do a series based on this novel and a series of novels. The first one's entitled The Passage, about kind of like The Walking Dead, but instead of with zombies, they're kind of these monster vampires. I really didn't like the first book, so I can't see myself podcasting about that. Beautiful Ruins is another book I read. Kind of fun back and forth in some ways about Liz Taylor and Richard Burton filming Cleopatra in Italy way back when and how that ties into modern lives. Wasn't a huge fan of it. The Fifth Season, which is about the sci-fi planet, which is entitled The Broken Earth. That's coming down the pike. John Updike's Rabbit Run and his rabbit books. They're thinking about making a series. Boy, I was not a fan of those. So I started looking at, what else? Movies. Movies coming out this year, August 31st, The Little Stranger. It's going to star Domhnall Gleeson, Ruth Wilson, Will Powder, and Charlotte Rampling. I really, really liked that book, so that could be a good movie. A book I didn't quite enjoy as much, but I know a lot of people loved, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, is going to be out October 19th, starring Kate Blanchett. And then we've just got a bunch of Stephen King projects coming down the pike. There's going to be Hearts in Atlantis, which was a short story collection. They did a film based on one of the short stories that had nothing to do with Hearts in Atlantis, but they named it Hearts in Atlantis. They're going to make a movie based on the short story that actually involved playing the game Hearts. It Chapter 2 is coming down the pike. They're talking about doing the Long Walk movie.
That'd be great. The Long Walk.
A great book entitled The Talisman has also been optioned. And maybe our best hope, even though it's so far away, is The Stand. Stephen King's The Stand is going to be a 10-episode miniseries. Finally, Dan Simmons himself, his flashback novel is getting a TV series adaptation.
The one that I love so much.
You left it on a plane. Catfish, is there anything else that we might be thinking about doing? And listeners, to be honest, stuff pops up. Always go to our Facebook page and give us suggestions.
Yeah, give us suggestions. One that's sort of on my radar, I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan.
Okay.
And there is a adaptation of Fahrenheit 451 that is showing on Saturday night.
This Saturday on HBO.
That's right. Whoa, you really sold that. So that's a possibility as well. That's one of my book I love. It's very kind of a 1984-ish novel.
I know Catch-22 is coming down the pike too.
Oh, so that Catch-22 is my favorite book of all time, and I love it too much to abide any kind of adaptation of it.
Ouch. Alan Arkin is turning over in his bed because he's not dead yet. Listeners, if you want to follow us along on all the crazy podcast journeys we do, the best place to do it, I've said it until your ears are blue, facebook.com/double P podcast. That's the word double, the single letter P, the word podcast, plural, facebook.com/double P podcast. Catfish, 1 week from tonight, you will not be here. What's going on?
I am boycotting after tonight's long episode. No, sadly, I will be up in San Francisco for work. So Mork will be taking my place, and I've told him to be just as serious as I am.
Oh, no. Next week, the final episode of Season 1, Episode 10, entitled We Are Gone.
Spoiler alert!
The expedition's epic journey reaches its climax as men find themselves in a final confrontation with the Inuit mythology they've trespassed into. Uh-oh.
Okay, well, and then we know what that is, and let me do it one last time, because I won't be here for the last episode.
Do it.
Tuunbaq! Oh, Tuunbaq! Eat me now, baby, Tuunbaq! Suck my soul out.
Need a shaman. For everybody here on the Double P Podcast Network, my name is Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter.
And my name is Catfish. You can hit me up at CJGman67. And next week will be the last episode of Ice Cold.